Hi, welcome to another episode of CC Top Solutions. Today, we're doing a revival episode. We're bringing my 65 Mustang with my 86 or whatever Roller 302 back to life. All I need to do is pop that intake on that we just restored that looks beautiful in place of this one, which is a factory aluminum Ford one from the 80s. Pop a carburetor on, set the linkages up, put the distributor in. Piece of cake. I just set the intake in place just to see how it would look, and it looks great, but when you look at the rest of the engine, this is looking a little bumpy. I feel like I could put a little bit of work into this and make it look a lot nicer. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go ahead and clean up the front of this engine. I think they like to call that a rattle can rebuild. First real step here, we're gonna go ahead and unbolt as much as we can to expose the front of the engine so we can get in there with a shop vac and cleaners and wire brushes. You'll see, it's fun. Pro tip, our bolts holding the harmonic damper pulley on were so tight that the actual engine was cranking over instead of the bolts loosening. So what I did was I took the belt and I just wedged it like this, put some pressure on it like that, so the belt actually holds the damper back. Little mechanical leverage. Physics 101 by CC Top Solutions. I almost forgot to mention another pro tip. Whenever you're doing a job like this, get a can or whatever to hold all the fasteners. My can of choice is chock full of nuts, New York style. Well, as you can see, that opened things up quite a bit. Now we have plenty of access to get in here with cleaners and wire brushes, and then ultimately to tape and paint everything. So it's gonna end up looking real nice. And here's our pile of stuff that we removed. This will probably just chuck and get new, but the pulleys and brackets we're going to go ahead and sandblast and prime and paint. The fan, I think I'm going to put a better fan on there. Everybody has their own opinions about what cleansers work the best. My opinion is the right one. I stick with Goo Gone and Goof Off and things like that, so I just sprayed this engine down with Goof Off, which is like brand X Goo Gone, and take a look at how well this works. See that? Right? It gets a lot of that grease and crap right off of there. So that's why I'm a big fan of using these products. That and they're cheap. It seems like I never seem to have brake fluid or brake cleaner around when I need it. So I just stick with this. I mean, look at that heavy grease and oil. Comes right off with this. As you can see, we stripped this down all the way. There's still some dust and things like that in it. So what we're gonna do, and a lot of that dust is actually greasy, we're gonna wipe it down with lacquer thinner, let it dry, and then we're gonna go ahead and prime it. Check that out. My last name stamped into the cylinder heads. Isn't that cool? That's from when these heads were redone back in the 90s. This is always one of my favorite parts. The application of the primer. Look at that. Woo! Man, I'm good. This is how you rebuild an engine, right? Looks pretty good, and then I wanted to get right here as well. Look at that, barely any overspray on the valve cover. I believe for the entree, the madam ordered a Ford light blue. We finished up our sandblasting process. You can see, it looks perfect. Now this is a key step. We want to bake these things at like 450, 500 degrees for a half hour, 45 minutes. It just gets all the contaminants out of the metal, prevents fish eyes. And those of you with real keen eyes might be like, hey, those aren't Ford brackets. And you're right. These two right here, these are leftovers. Mopar 383 from the Ram Charger. I do think it's interesting. Take a look at the Mopar bracket versus the Ford bracket. Look how thick the Ford one is versus the Mopar one. the dealio there? Price are saving some money on metal or what? All right, let's cook these things and then we're gonna prime and paint them. Now while our parts are cooking, we're gonna sandblast ourselves a Ford fan. I love these fans. Most people probably hate them, but if anyone out there has any of these things, I'm buying. These are Ford, these are made in like the 60s and 70s. The stamping number is on it somewhere. I think this one is D0, blah, 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 whatever. Yep, there it is. D0SE. So, hey, I like it. It's a 70. That'll work perfect in one of my cars. There we go. 15 minutes of sandblasting later. Exactly 15 minutes. I did time that. Front and back, all good. Very nice. Now I'm going to go ahead and prime and paint this along with our brackets that are cooking. Actually, speaking of brackets, it's been 15 minutes. Let's see how warm they are. All right, looks like we're looking at about 300 degrees on the grill. Let's see inside here what it is. Woo! Yeah. Oh yeah, it's about 400 degrees. 360, 350. These are all about the same. Oh, no, that one's 525. Okay, it's a real thin Mopar metal. Maybe this half, you know what? I must have that burner up higher. Let me crank this side up a little bit. Ooh, maybe not that much. And we'll let these cook for a little while longer. Although, if you look, you really don't see any smoke coming out of there. At this point, I think all the contaminants are probably cooked off. When the contaminants are coming off, you could see smoke. All right, we can shut the grill off, but that area there where it's like starting to blue, it's now 250, 270, but that was around 550. And really, you know, they were hot enough. Everything was over 400. Plenty. No point in letting it keep going. We're just burning gas. So we'll let this stuff cool off and then we'll go prime it. Ended up using a different primer on these. Normally I would use Rust-Oleum heavy rusted metal on account of an Uncle Tony's Garage suggestion. I couldn't find it. So instead I had an old can of Duplicolor engine primer. So I primed these parts with that. Let's see how they hold up in comparison to everything else. These will be on the red 65 Mustang, so that'll be kind of cool. Check this out. Mopar must have farmed out their bracket making to a company named Tuff. See? Proof is in the writing. As you can see, the engine's going back together pretty nicely. We did hit a problem though, and that's okay. The channel's called CC Top Solutions because we know exactly how to deal with problems. What happened was we put our alternator in and the battery post was basically touching right back here. Unless I had it all the way adjusted out. You know, if I adjusted it in even the least, it would touch. But we can't have that. That would mess up our fresh paint. So the solution is we decided to reclock the alternator. So reclocking an alternator, basically what that means is there's 4 fasteners that hold the rear of the case in place on here. You know, here you have your rotor, and here you have your stator, and inside there you have your brushes right here. And note this Allen key, that's holding them in place. What I did was I dove right in with both feet, no brain, just undid all the screws and then tried to rotate the back of this thing. So I would end up basically reclocking where the battery post was. When it wouldn't rotate, I decided to give it a little tug and boop! Our springs pushed our brushes right out. And I just spent the past half hour screwing around using my Allens to push the brushes back in, while at the same time using a smaller Allen. And this is what I should have done from the get-go. Stuck an Allen right through the back of the alternator to hold the brushes in place. But now that they're in place, this is very, very simple. I just look at where I want this to be relative to our post right here. I should have taken a picture of this in advance so I knew where it started, but I didn't. But all right, so you can kind of see what's going on here, where we just sort of move this to where we move the back of the alternator to where we need it to be. Here, that should give you guys a better idea. Here's a picture I took of the alternator installed in the car just a few minutes ago. Sorry about that glare, I see that too. But you see how it would be real convenient if our battery post was like right here instead of back here. That's what I mean by reclocking. So we can use this right here as our reference when we want to put our battery post right near that screw hole. So here's that piece right here. And now this does spin fairly easily. So you just rotate it, rotate the back of it until these screws are lined up. And then you put the screws back in. Make sure you don't forget your little ground tab, important. Put your screws in, tighten it all back up, and make sure you remove your Allen clip that's holding your springs in place, and you should be good to go. One take, piece of cake. So to put our intake gasket on, I went ahead and I ran a bead of RTV here, and I also have dabs of RTV underneath these gaskets, basically holding these in place. And with these gaskets, the blue seal is top, you know, towards the intake. So everything is ready. This is secured for, I don't know, a good minute and a half. So I'm gonna go ahead and set the intake on. You can see I put 5/16 in studs, 5/16 studs in to help guide it down. I don't need that. It's just sort of a security blanket for me. All right, we have all our manifold bolts just finger tight. Now what we want to do is we want to slowly bring these up to about 20 foot-pounds. We're going to do it in increments. First increment, we're going to go 10 foot-pounds. This is an inch-pound torque wrench, 12 inches to a foot. If we want to go 10 pound-feet, what do we set this to? That's right, 120 inch-pounds. Very good. All right, that's all properly torqued down. Now I think I'm gonna remove these cruddy looking valve covers and put on our replacements. That's gonna make it look so much nicer in here. And ultimately I'm gonna pull these plugs out of here too and pop the distributor in, and we'll be in business pretty quick here. All right, valve covers off. You can see we have some like weird residue. We need to wipe all that stuff clean, then we'll put our new gaskets and we'll install some fresh valve covers that look way better. So this is something else I like to do. I like to put studs, just like I did with the intake. I put 2 studs for each valve cover, so this way I can put the gasket on there and then lay the valve cover down and not have to fight it. Also, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier. I know I've mentioned in other videos. Always, always, always put anti-seize in your fasteners. If you don't, you end up with all kinds of problems. For example, when I took this apart, the bolt that was holding the alternator, well, that's still in the alternator. That's snapped in half. When I was younger, I didn't know about anti-seize, and now that I've learned about it, I put it on pretty much everything, even my sandwiches. No, just kidding, don't eat this stuff, but seriously, anti-seize everything. It's just starting to drizzle, so I'm probably gonna wrap it up, but check it out. See how I've reclocked this? Now this is over here. Earlier, this stud was actually touching the block right down here. Basically, see how this stud aligns with this bolt hole? It was aligned with this bolt hole, or maybe the one beneath it, but it was hitting the block. Now we have all kinds of movement, so reclocking the alternator, great idea, very easy to do. Gonna take a little bit of a time out from everybody. I'm gonna do the wiring, and the wiring is incredibly boring to watch, but the general concept here is, because I put an electronic distributor inside here, I need actual keyed 12 volts getting to the distributor and the coil. The original system that came in this car, Points, used a resistor wire to drop that voltage, so it won't run right. So I always do this. Every one of my cars, even my Lincoln build, the Cougar, the Ram Charger, I always install a relay that picks up off of the original keyed ignition. So you put it to on, feeds the contact, the coil, the relay. The contacts of the relay are fed directly off the battery, and then the output of that relay feeds all of our ignition systems and our previous circuits. The system works great. It just takes a minute to do it, and it's very boring to watch me do it. So I'm gonna take a time out for me as while I do it. We have all of our wiring roughed in. Everything is electrically connected and ready to go, with the exception of the ground for the choke. I'll do that some other time. We're about to try and start this. Everything is initially timed. We're gonna go ahead and top it off with antifreeze, and when we do crank it, you're gonna wanna try and watch right down here. I think you can see that. That's our fuel filter. Before we crank it, this looks like root beer. It's not. This is 2-cycle gasoline. I'm gonna fill the float bowl through the vents, and hopefully this will fire up. It'll be timed close enough that it'll continue to run just fine, and it will start to draw some nice fresh gas from the fuel tank. Wish me luck. All right, ignition is on. I'm just going to manually turn this over, and we'll see if we get some spark. Huh. You have Our starter solenoid might be shot. Okay, we're gonna bypass the starter solenoid, see if we get some spark. If we have a problem, we have a solution. Might not be our starter solenoid that shot, that might be our starter that shot. Or, you know what? Let's check our voltage while we're doing that. Maybe the battery is just low. Kind of a tall shot in the dark there, but let's check it. When you're cranking, your battery voltage should stay pretty high, like 11 plus. Oh, battery's dead. 10.7 volts just sitting here. The battery's not taking much of a charge. It's sitting here at like 2 amps. I'm not sure what's going on, if my charger's not working right, or if maybe this battery has failed, but it's only from 2019, which top of my yellow top, that's nothing. It should be fine. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna have Honest Abe give a little assist. Time to break out the jumper cables. All right, now we have Honest Abe giving an assist. Let's see if we can get some crankages out of this thing. I already have the ignition on. Now I'm just gonna jump our starter solenoid. See what we get. Oh, that was a pretty good backfire. I think our timing might be wrong. No problem. I can fix that right quick. That means we're 180 degrees out in the distributor. The way I set the timing, I put my finger over top dead center, and I felt for when the compression stopped. Well, it's a 50-50 chance. It seems like every time I do that, I get it wrong. All right, we're going ahead and retimed it. You know, originally we had number 1 right here. That was 180 degrees out. Now number 1 is right here. So that's how we retimed it. We just moved all the spark plug wires. Good to go. Let's crank this thing and see if we get some good noises. That doesn't seem right. Sounded like it backfired out the exhaust, which, I don't know, maybe I'll give it a little gas, see if that helps. I still hear him backfiring. I guess I'm gonna have to take a time out here and figure this out. All right, you can see that we're on top dead center, right? You can see our mark on our harmonic damper. What we have going on, our distributor is butted up against here. Where the rotor is pointing right now should be number 1 cylinder. The rotor is pointing just beyond number 1. So basically our timing is too retarded. The rotor's pointed like right here. Really, number 1 needs to be here. So what we're gonna do is just move all of our plug wires one wire over. Here we go again, right? All right, here we go again. One take piece of cake. Yeah. Drum roll, please. Okay. Clearly, I don't know what I'm doing. Here's our rotor position. Right now we are about 10 degrees before top dead center, assuming our harmonic damper is right. That's a big assumption. But I think it's close because I was able to put my finger over number 1 cylinder and that did align with where air stopped blowing out of number 1. So all we want to do is make it so number 1 plug wire is lined up, basically pointing right at that intake bolt. That's our whole thing, and it should fire right up. All right, here we go again. This is probably gonna purr like a kitten. By the way, this is really good for the carburetor. Oh. Somebody forgot to tighten the hose clamp. We got a fuel leak. All right, let's try this again. It was encouraging that time that there was no backfires. Oh, that's not encouraging. Clearly, I don't have it timed right. There's another thing with small block Ford engines. Could be that. There's 2 different firing orders for these. Right now I have it set up on the 302 high output, 51 firing order, based on like what I thought came out of it. I better double check that. Maybe that's not what it was. Yet another timing adjustment. Let's give this a shot. Shim, wow! Well, at a bare minimum, at least our battery took a charge. All right, well, maybe if I give it a little gas, it'll help. Okay, still definitely wrong. All right, here we go again. Swapped it 180 out. See what happens. Shazam! Oh, we're in business. That's sounding pretty good. I think it's a little on the retarded side. So all right, we'll advance the timing a bit and see what we can get. That doesn't sound right. Maybe I should go more retarded with it. At this point, my timing was too retarded. I had to advance it by turning the distributor clockwise. In order to do that, I'm gonna have to move the plugs once more, but we are in business. We're gonna get this thing running tonight. All right, this should run. Oh, no, too much advance. Let's try that. Close. Oh, okay, it runs. Voila! Not exactly like a top, but it runs. Actually, it runs pretty good. Get a little smoke coming out the exhaust, but that's all right. I have all kinds of crazy, you know, I've got that 2-cycle and the gas. Well, all right, we got my timing light out. We're 1280 degrees, 46 degrees total advance right now. But we have our vacuum advance hooked up. You can see our timing pointer down there. I'm assuming you guys can see that. I know I can see it. Really, I'd like to get our RPM down and see what our timing is. So I disconnected the vacuum advance to see how much timing we would lose, and we didn't lose any. We're at 1080 RPM, 46 degrees timing. Too much timing in it right now. I'm gonna take about 20 degrees out of it. All right, I got the Mustang idling at about 750 RPM. Our timing's at 14 degrees initial. It idles pretty good. You hear that whistling noise? I'm 99% sure I have a vacuum leak somewhere on the carburetor. And I noticed this. Because it's dark, you can see this. If I rev it up, the fan hits the transmission cooling line. You guys see that spark? We did a little bit of work off camera. All I did was I adjusted our idle mixture screws. They were way, way too wide open. They were like 3 or 4 turns each. Now they're 2 turns each. And watch this. And the engine is warmed up at this point. I patched all the little leaks. Right? Not bad. It's starting to rain. I'm going to park this. Ultimately, I need to change oil, but I mean, that's pretty good. You can see all that blue smoke is gone. And it's idling right now that I've got those idle mixtures turned way down. I don't see any drips, so I think we're good. So we're going to go ahead and park this, and ultimately we're going to do an oil change. Theory proven, 15 times the charm. So, if you're ever considering putting one of those 19-inch fans in your first generation Mustang, take a look at this picture. It turns out that sparking was not the fan impacting the transmission cooling line, it was actually impacting the worm clamp that was holding the lower radiator hose on. So that was a real easy fix, I just rotated the worm clamp, but if any of you consider following my footsteps, which I would highly recommend, before you crank the engine, just hand rotate that fan and make sure there's no interferences. Also, check this out. Real great before and after picture of this engine. unbelievable with a little bit of elbow grease. And I mean, granted, I did put some new parts on there. So I would say total, probably $300 worth of new parts. However, a lot of those new parts I already had. They were just leftovers from other projects. So real cost to me was like $100. So pretty cool improvement for only $100. Next month, I hope to come out with at least 2 videos, maybe 3 or 4. A lot of content, a lot going on. It's gonna be a blast. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, tune in next month for even more great content. Have a happy Thanksgiving.